Hare Krishna, everyone. Dear Prabhus. Mahabhart's waving his hand saying, please come forward as much as possible to take up the seats up here close. Oh, Giriraj Maharaj. Welcome, Giriraj Maharaj. Hare Krishna. So we want to thank everyone so much for coming for this memorial service for our beloved Gunagrahi Maharaj. It's so nice for us to gather here because this was like Maharaj's home base for so many, many, many years. I think he probably spent more time here than anywhere else. And there's a whole history, and Maharaj had a special, touched each of our hearts in so many special ways. And that's what it's about today, just remembering Gunagrahi Maharaj for the wonderful devotee he is, and the wonderful way he touched our lives, and his beautiful dedication and practical, the way he preached on behalf of Srila Prabhupada and on behalf of Krishna consciousness. So that's why we're here today, to share our memories of Maharaj and to keep him in our hearts. And also to literally thank him for everything he's done for us. So that being said, I was thinking, Rishabhadev Prabhu, we'd like you to come forward and speak first. Is that all right? The reason he told me that, Rishabhadev Prabhu, he said that he was called out for Laguna Beach to pick up Gunagrahi Maharaj at the airport when he first came from Buffalo to come and preach here at this temple, to become the temple president. So, oh yeah. So what we'll be doing, just so everybody has an idea of the overall schedule that we're following here, is that we'll be sharing our thoughts and memories between now and 12 o'clock, and then there'll be Artik for Shishi Radha Giridhari and their lordships, and then after that, His Holiness Giriraj Swami will be speaking. So we're very happy to have you here as a part of this. So, that's, and then after that will be prasadam. So, okay. So please have a seat here. Okay.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharani Nirvisheshanyavadi Pastyate Desha Tarani Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripasindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So as Jumuna had described, I was in Laguna Beach, and I was called, I believe it was Jayatirtha, may have been Karandar, had called me up and said if I'd come up to pick up this person who's come in from New York, I believe Buffalo, New York, and that he was a very important person, and that I should, greet him and bring him to the Los Angeles temple. So I got to do that. And from the very first moment of seeing him, I just felt, wow, this is a friend forever. He was so open-hearted and so warm and so grateful too. So we were driving, to the Los Angeles temple, and I got to spend some time there with him, just getting to know him. And of course, getting to know him even deeper and better. Over the years, I was in Laguna Beach and he here in SanDiego. And so there were many times that I could see him display all his natural Vaishnava qualities. Even in very testing situations, he always came off so perfect and clean. This very temple here that you see, this was a donation from one Laguna Beach member, Alex Kulik. And Alex was he was a hard nut. He was a pretty intense guy, and he was very peculiar and discriminating in who he would support. And he, right away, in meeting Gunagrahi Maharaj, well, look what he did. He purchased this place, and Gunagrahi Maharaj, at the time, Gunagrahi, Das Adhikari, and his wife Kartika, just made this such a fabulous place, which I'm so happy to see is still preserved today. I'm going to get into some intimate pastimes, not anything too controversial, but in that situation, Alex was a continuing supporter of ISKCON, so we had, relationship. And Srila Prabhupada himself had directed us in one meeting to establish a prasadam distributing company, which became Prasadam Distributing International, and Alex was part of that. And it was a very intense situation, and unbeknownst to us at the time, the federal government was also aware of our doings, investing a lot of money in companies in Newport Beach. And they had a plan. Now, a lawyer that was here in SanDiego, his name is Philip Damasa, he told us in the midst of the situation that arose, an entrapment, a very elaborate sting operation from the federal government, he said something very curious to me. And this was a lawyer who was very, very sophisticated. And he said to me, they're not after you guys in Laguna Beach. They don't even care about Alex. But for some unusual reason, and we don't understand why, I can't, in fact, he even bemused him. He goes, why would they care about the Hare Krishna movement? He said, but I can tell you that they're targeting the Hare Krishna movement, and they just think you guys are a weak link to it. So in the midst of all that, Alex, in this elaborate entrapment, was kidnapped. Now remember, he purchased this building for the service of Srila Prabhupada under Gunagrahi Maharaj's expert guidance. He purchased this building. So the kidnappers, that would have been he purchased this probably in 1975. And Alex, I'm kind of jumping ahead because I want others to talk to, but in 1977, Alex was kidnapped. Those kidnappers came as they knew that we were after them. Alex was a pretty heavy guy. They came to this temple. Gunagrahi Maharaj had a preaching program. He would, in the afternoons, it was very elaborate. He'd welcome the whole community, and they'd have a dinner program, and lots of kirtan, of course. It's always kirtan at Gunagrahi. And so these kidnappers came to the program, and he hosted them, knowing the situation. And so I came down, and Gunagrahi, one could kind of think that it was his maturity or just his common sense, but actually it was his bhakti. He told me, he goes, yes, I have the doors open for anyone that comes. I just want them to take prasadam and chant the holy name. I don't make discrimination. Who is who's done what. I will host. So even risking the support and the good favor of Alex, he was willing just to perform pure bhakti, not considering anything. And that was the most intelligent thing to do. If he had ever assisted us or in any way, it would have been very bad. But he did not. He did not do that. He just existed as a perfect devotee. In fact, I had a couple of meetings with His Divine Grace all about how to handle this situation in Laguna Beach, because our congregation was supportive and had been from the time it opened in 1970. And so many devotees had joined from the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, which had been established there. So His Divine Grace gave me very, very specific instructions how to walk that razor's edge, both accommodating the sincerity of these people, but also being very careful to be prophylactic, to not have any influence or bad influence from them. So Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada, he's in Divine Grace that I know. So that was in August of 76. And I never sat with Gunagrahi Maharaj and told him about those instructions that Srila Prabhupada had given me, how to deal with people. But I can tell you, just in viewing what had occurred then, all the different leaders who were interacting with this congregation, that Gunagrahi Maharaj, he perfectly abided by those good instructions, knowing exactly how to be loving and liberal and accommodating, but at the same time remaining perfectly pure. He did that so expertly. And being here in SanDiego over those tumultuous years, he had so much interaction with devotees that were sincere and supportive, but at the same time having maybe personal difficulties and a very countercultural lifestyle. Of course, as so many of us from the 60s at Gunagrahi also came out of that counterculture of the 60s. And he kept that youthful revolutionary spirit. It never lost him, so he stayed young. And that was very important in pushing on this movement, because as we had said to one another back then, don't trust anyone over 30. Because by the time someone gets about that age, they start thinking about their own security and future. Whereas when you're young, you're willing to just sacrifice all for a cause. And Gunagrahi maintained that heart, that revolutionary heart. Srila Prabhupada guided all of us, and he expertly took that guidance and was able to push on Krishna consciousness in the ways that His Divine Grace directed, which was kirtan and prasadam especially, and philosophy, as much as those that are around you can understand. Need to think. I know that I met Gunagrahi last, it might have been at a Ratha Yatra just a couple of years ago, like that. And there was, even though I'd gone off into exploring other ways, he never, was constrained by any kind of barrier to connect. He was a devotee, was a natural, madhyam devotee, non-sectarian, just always willing to encourage anyone who was trying to give something in some way to the service of the Supreme Lord under the direction of the spiritual master. I can tell you one beautiful pastime. This was mystical. This is very mystical. Srila Prabhupada had passed away in November of 1977. And in January of 78, I moved down to SanDiego with the cooperation and direction of Rameshwar Maharaj. So I came here. And it was a time when there was so many legal problems and massive publicity that we had to deal with. But, all of that was unimportant, because the only thing that was important was that Srila Prabhupada just departed. That was a cosmic event. Anything else was very insignificant. And I know that for Gunagrahi, he was, like so many, just almost bewildered. He knew that to push on, to have Prabhupada stay with us, is following his instructions. And although he was the temple president, we were just together, the two of us. And this is January 78, and he was saying to me, he goes, I just want to preach. I just want to do kirtan. I want to distribute Prabhupada's books. I don't want to have any of this management responsibility. I just want to really be in the core of everything and just do what I know pleases His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. I just want to do kirtan. I'd just like to go out on the road. That's all I want to do. Just constantly absorb myself in delivering the holy name to especially new people and inviting them into this culture by distributing Prabhupada's books. And we were like there, it was a very tearful time. So we were there talking like that, and he had revealed his heart, as a Vaishnava does. And then, very mystically, someone comes through the door and says, actually, I'll tell you exactly what he said. I have a very high IQ, and I could really manage here. And it was right after Gunagrahi he said that. And I looked at him, and he goes, yeah, please, can you? So you know that the Supreme Lord, Srila Prabhupada too, has an ear to what he was saying, his heart. And I guess the rest is history. I remember at one point we flew out together to Baltimore, of all places, where he had a relative. And he was so humble. He was always so candid and open. But he didn't, he goes, oh, you don't want to meet my family. He says, but please go pick up the van. He had it all arranged, where to go, a perfect thing. And so I did that, and I remember some of the first use of it. He took Rameshwar, Maharaj, myself, Gopa Vrindapal, and we went out to look at a farm that Alex, again, very supportive of him, was willing to purchase of Dr. Jensen. It was a really beautiful trip. And he was so happy, now I have a facility, let me get out on the road. And that he did, and I guess as everyone knows, Krishna Fest, introducing so many new people. Lord Chaitanya wanted, especially the residents of India, to perfect their lives and then give everything to the world. Well, Gunagrahi, he did that. He really did that. And he shared everything Prabhupada gave with everyone he could come in contact with. What a glorious life. And of course, that life led him to Vrindavan, to our eternal home, and to a place where I'm sure Srila Prabhupada, picked him up, guided him back to where he is. And I hope that later we can sing some bhajans about Vaishnavas. This will be part of the program. If we can read these songs, like from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur about Vaishnavas, sing them and then read their translations, then much better than I can, you can understand more about the glories of Gunagrahi. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Rishabdev Prabhu. Okay, next we're going to ask, by the way, Rishabdev Prabhu, you also helped Gunagrahi Maharaj get the Vaikuntha Rath, right? Which literally was a transcendental, it's a road ship, but kind of like a transcendental spaceship that traveled all over to enable the preaching of Krishna consciousness as Gunagrahi Maharaj liked to do. Okay, Pavamana. Giriraj Swami, I know you'll be speaking later, but did you want to speak now some too, or would you rather you'll be saying everything during your class? It's up to you. Okay. Okay. All right, Pavamana Prabhu, would you kindly?
very interesting that I was in Laguna Beach from 1976 to 1980 when I came down here. So there were a lot of things going on in Laguna Beach. We got a new temple building and so on and so on. And at the time, I was not real happy there. I was just, I'm in a mode of, I like to travel, I like to move around, but staying around the temple was a little hard for me. And one day, out of the blue, Gunagrahi came. This is 1980. And he says, I need a mechanic or a driver from my motorhome. Would you like to come along? It's like, yes. My ship has come in. So came down to SanDiego. And I had not known him very well before. I think I'd probably met him a few times. But I knew that he was the temple president in the old location on Thorn Street. And they had built this beautiful temple down here with the help of his wife Kirtika and all the devotees. So came down, and he had this motorhome that, I have to understand, he was very frugal, to say the least. Very frugal, but he had this idea. He was convinced by Dayal Chandra and Dinanath Prabhu, some devotees here, that they could put a diesel motor in this motorhome and save some money by buying cheap diesel in Mexico. What a great idea. This is the diesel craze back in the 70s and 80s. And so they had taken the car up to Los Angeles, and somehow over the course of a year, and Lord knows how many megabucks, he never had a problem getting money. The day I met him, he never had a problem. If he snapped his fingers, he could have money as his head. Not a problem. Okay? The whole time I knew him. He was always very good at, he had this Midas touch. Everything he touched broke. Without fail. Oh, why did that happen? Why did that? He would always say it like that. So, I was very good at fixing things, so we worked well together. So anyway, so the devotees who had been working on the car for the year, I didn't realize this until much later. They would always ask him, well, we need to do this. And he would say, well, are you sure we need it? Are you sure? Because you'd have to come up with some more money, But when he got down here, and as soon as I arrived on the scene, anything I told him that needed to be done, immediately, he said, yes, let's go ahead and do it. So it kind of miffed the other devotees who had been working on it. So anyway, so there were a lot of problems with this arrangement, which I could go on for hours and hours and probably fall asleep if you haven't already. We broke down many times. On and on and on. And so because they had skimped the different motor in the car and putting the motor and the gearbox together, it required a special adapter. So because they were trying to save money, the adapter was never made properly. Okay, so you have the motor spinning here and the transmission is spinning here, but they weren't on center. Okay. So it caused a lot of stress in there. It caused a lot of problems. So anyway, getting into the person, Gunagrahi Swami, as Rishabh was saying, there was no one too high or too low not to preach to them. At that time, there were devotees around the movement with their bhakta programs. Okay, so Guna Maharaj, and Dharmasetu can also tell us more about it. One of his first bhaktas was, what was it? Was it? Well, Vaikuntha, but the other, Irving. Bhakta Irving. So if you all know Bhakta Irving. Bhakta Irving, I think, was from New York or Jersey or something like that. What's that? Brooklyn. Brooklyn, yeah. Right. So, I don't know where he came from, but it was just almost kind of like a homeless person. He was actually kind of an avadut. He had a lot of problems with his body and this and that, the other thing. And the last time I saw him here years ago, he had joined the Padayatra in India, and he had club feet. He hoofed it all over India into the Himalayas, and I believe that, I think Lokanath Maharaj, somebody gave him initiation. And if you want to find somebody that has faith in the holy name, you go find him. He said, you have to have faith in the holy name. So he was one of Gunagrahi Maharaj's bhaktas. We had another devotee. Anybody remember Kirby? Kirby? What's that? Parvat Muni? Okay. Kirby was, kind of son of a redneck, I guess, and lived in El Cajon and, whatever. He had his problems. But Maharaj spent a lot of time with Bhakta Kirby. Then we had people like Steve Opp. Okay. I'm not sure what his actual occupation was. Do you know? Graphic design? Okay. Very, very intelligent. I would have loved to see him here today. Good friends with Guru Maharaj. He preached to like anybody and everybody. He was completely fearless. And everything that he tried, every project he did was expertly done. We had a restaurant up in Locadia. Now, I know Bhadra isn't here. But our first restaurant was over just across the street from SanDiego State College with 40,000 plus students right across the street. And unfortunately, it was not well managed and it completely failed and they lost a ton of money. So then Guru Maharaj wanted to open a restaurant in Locadia. Now, if you walked out on the street and you looked down, it was on the Old Coast Highway, you would hardly see a single soul. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm not going to say anything, but they're just doing it all over again. They're going to lose their shirt. What is this? And they're spending all this effort and everything to open this restaurant. The first night it opened, there wasn't enough seating. People were sitting on the curb eating, standing up eating, okay, and eventually, had to break down the wall and, go into the next door. And it was grand success. Then, got to have another restaurant. Another one? He was opening a second restaurant in North Park. And then they used that kitchen to supply the one in Locadia. So he knew how to reach people. And we went to, in Houston, there was a certain area of town where all the clubs were. Okay, so where does he go? Right in the center of it. Okay, and I didn't really know much about his preaching in Washington, D.C., but I was thinking, because there's a wonderful picture of after he passed away and all the devotees had gathered. From up above, you could see hundreds and hundreds of devotees. How many people he actually preached to and affected their lives? And I would not be exaggerating, in the millions. In the millions. I kid you not. Of all the people that came through the temples and all the people that he preached to, and he was just as Prabhu was describing, he just wanted to preach. He did everywhere he go. And he also had a very good rapport with the homies. Okay. He was not afraid to deal with people on the, let's see, the kind of lower end of society. There was a devotee, I think his name was Shankar. Was Shankar Shan? He was in Lompoc prison for committing homicide. And Maharaj went there, made him a devotee, or he may have been already a devotee, made him a devotee, visited him several times, and he came to SanDiego and lived in the community. And at some point he had a heart attack, but anyway. So he was not afraid to work with anybody, and he knew how to deal with everyone personally. He was the best manager that ever walked the earth. He knew exactly how to engage every single devotee in something that he liked to do for Krishna. Ask me how I know. Okay. He tolerated me for so many years. There were times that I had disagreements, but in the end, he was always right. But the few times that I thought I was right, didn't matter. So he was very, very intelligent. He never, you couldn't pull the wool over his eyes. He was very street smart. Knew exactly what to do. So those years from 1980 to 1986, I wish I could relive those years over and over and over and over and over, again and again. They were the best years of my life. So I could probably go on for a long time. But he affected everyone so positively. He was never, he would chastise you if you needed it. He wouldn't go along with everything. Okay, if you thought that you know, and the last time that he spoke to me, when I went to visit him in India, he sat down and read me the Riot Act. I mean, he's just saying that, you know, I used to give such nice classes and this and that, and you know, like that. So he was not afraid to chastise you, but it was always out of love. It was always how to fan that spark, right? How to fan that spark and make you more enthusiastic to serve Krishna. So, unfortunately, because my brain is getting old and forgetful, there's so many things. I used to make, when we were in Houston, he went to Houston, there was a devotee there, Sundar Gopal, who wanted to open a center in Malaysia, in Singapore. And so Maharaj was going there to help the situation. So while I was there, one of the sculptors, Adidev, anybody know Adidev? One of the fate sculptors. Maharaj wanted him to make a diorama, changing bodies diorama. The old dioramas that had the single figures, I don't know if you remember them, they had this, individual figurines. But Adidev sculpted when it was all in one piece. So he wanted me to take charge of building them. And it's a long story. But it was a big struggle going on because Tamal Krishna was in charge of the zone. And the devotees living in Houston, it was being used pretty much as a collection center. So there's, a lot of politics going on and struggles and so on and so on. But Gunagrahi Maharaj was there to try to straighten things out. And there were some things that he was unable to do, but he was always, in the service of Srila Prabhupada, having kirtan and everything like that. So, I'm trying to think of. Over 6 years, there's a lot of things that happened. I think I probably had more association with him directly than a lot of other devotees. We used to take the motorhome and go and preach in Tucson, Phoenix, and Flagstaff. So we'd go to the, I believe it's the University of Arizona in Tucson. Is that right? Yeah. And there was another devotee, Ganga Mantri. Here's another staple. I wish he was here. We would go. We had a preaching center in Phoenix, and I know a lot of the Maharajis were there. So it was a kind of a circuit. We would go out. I can't remember, probably every month or two, something like that, for over several years. And we had people that he would meet out there, and then we'd go to their homes at night and have a program, and we'd cook the prasadam in the motorhome. It was usually khichdi, some cabbage pakoras. because we didn't have much money. Cabbage pakoras and halva. And so I'd help him do the cooking. So over the years, there were several things that happened. There were kind of little mishaps and funny things that happened. So he came up with Pav stories. Once we were on our way to Denver. I don't remember where we came from. And it was late Sunday afternoon, and he had to get to the Sunday feast in Denver. But I was driving, and I was so hungry. I was so disturbed. I just had, I disobeyed him. I got off the freeway and tried to find a little, AM, PM or something like that. And he was so mad. So as we drove up to the AM, PM, I'm looking down, where the guards are for the wheels, but I forgot to look up with the overhang. Bam! Put a hole in the motorhome. So he went from mad to completely crazy. Anyway, but by the time we got to Denver, the feast was over. There was no prasadam left. So that became one pop story. Another story, we're driving down the road, and in the back, the tank, the septic tank for the sink and for the toilet were connected to the same one. And apparently I had left the water running, so it filled up the tank. So I started seeing some water, coming out from the commode. So I thought, I think I forgot to flush it. So you push the thing down. Instead of going down, it went up. And he's all the way down because there was a corridor, and this stinky stuff went all the way up to the front of the car. And he ended up having to clean it up. Bob story number 2. And there were so many funny times that happened over the years. But another thing was, there was one host. We always used to go to his house. I forget his name. And he was a follower of Hamsa. Anyway, one time we were at somebody's house, and he started spouting Mayavadi philosophy. I saw a side of Gunagrahi Maharaj I'd never seen. He got on his case like you would not believe, okay? And we never stayed at his house again, okay? So he was not afraid to confront somebody. He was fearless. And that was, pretty much his mode. He would do things that you think, how can this be possible? He was empowered. There was no other explanation, because practically anybody who could name something that he did that was not successful. Crickets, right? No, he was an amazing preacher, and I in looking at his life and seeing all the things that he did, I understand why. And he was afraid that when he was in Vrindavan, no one would come and see him, and that he would pass away alone. Have you all seen this picture of Gunagrahi after he passed away, and so many devotees there? Devotees all over the world. Those were just the ones that happened to be fortunate to be there. So I was very, very, very privileged to be able to have his association for those years. And I'll never forget it. And the more I think about it, the more fortunate I feel. And I feel a great loss, because I'm the type of person, I need someone to guide me. Just, give me something to do, wind me up, and I'll get it done. So I very much miss his association. Maybe in the future. Thank you very much, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Pavamana Prabhu. Okay, Radhadasi?
Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhya evacha patitanam pavanibhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. I don't think it's possible for any one person to really sum up Gunagrahi Goswami. There were so many sides to him, and he did so much. I'm not even going to go there because so many other devotees will talk about it. But one of the things that really stood out for me is how he was able to focus on projects and people at the same time. Usually, managers do one or the other. And he was able to do these amazing, huge projects and always expanding, but at the same time have a really deep personal connection with everyone that he met. And that's amazing. Myself, I'm one of those low people, when Maharaj preached to the high and the low, and, I was one of those people that didn't qualify. I had a lot of bad habits, a serious substance abuse problem, and I saw myself as somebody who liked the devotees, who appreciated the devotees, wanted to support the devotees, but I didn't see myself as a devotee. And Gunagrahi Maharaj made it clear to me that there was service for me. And he was one of the first people to give me a regular service and encourage me to see myself as a Hare Krishna, for heaven's sakes. I had no plan to become a Hare Krishna. But that was Maharaj. And he was always so kind to my children, He used to dance with Bhavananda in kirtan when Bhavananda was like 2-3 years old. Prema used to call him Krishna Daddy, and he'd call her Krishna Girl. And these are like simple things, but this is at a time when he's doing these huge, huge things for Srila Prabhupada, but that love was still there. One of the other things that he did for me was encourage me to write. And I used to show him my poetry, and he liked for devotees to show him their poetry. He would collect different poems, and then he'd share all of our poems, with the other writers. And so I got to connect with other devotees that way. And one of the last messages I got was he asked Yudhishthira, last time Yudhishthira was in India in July, he asked Yudhishthira to ask me to write him a poem. And unfortunately, I didn't finish it in time. But I'm going to read it now. And I'm sorry I'm late, Maharaj. This is for you. When we were lost, you found us, seeing our potential, not our faults, never letting us pretend we didn't know the way back home or whose children we really are. When we were thirsty, you poured out the nectar of the holy names with towering bells and djembe drums, never letting us forget that ambrosia is our birthright and bliss the nature of the soul. When we grew tired, you pushed us on, demanding that we find a hidden strength, never letting us pretend that good enough is good enough for Srila Prabhupada. Good, better, best, never let it rest until your good is better and your better is best. When we struggled with our minds and the tempest of desire, you promised us there is no loss, never letting us despair, for Krishna is not ungrateful, and Srila Prabhupada has the key to the back door. When we get home, you'll welcome us with love that's real and strong, never doubting that we'll arrive, full of knowledge, full of bliss, and we'll serve the Lord together once again. Gunagrahi Goswami ki.
Thank you very much, Radhadasi. Okay, Vaishnava Das would like to say a few words.
Hare Krishna. For those who don't know me, my name is Vaishnava Das, and a lot of people here have known Gunagrahi Maharaj through a long period of time. My case was different because I knew him probably about a year and a half before. I met him about a year and a half before he departed his body. Because last year I was in Vrindavan and I served him as an assistant. It was wonderful service. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. It really changed me, to say the least. And I could talk for a long, long time about that. In Vrindavan, he called me. At the time, I hadn't been initiated yet, and so I was Bhakta Will, and he used to call me Vrindavan Will because he saw that I liked doing these errands, or how do I put it? I guess you can call them errands, but they really turn into little adventures. And he said, "You're just like Indiana Jones, but I can't call you Indiana Jones. I have to call you Vrindavan Bill." And I was going somewhere with that, and I kind of forgot. I lost my train of thought. Oh, I know. So there was, right towards the tail end of my time in India last year, which was right around this time, he had to go to South India for Ayurvedic treatment. And so we left, it was him and I, we left Vrindavan and we went down to Kerala. And down there at the Ayurvedic hospital in a town called, I can't remember, Karlmana, that's the name of the town, Karlmana, in Palakkad district. I ended up going out and doing all these little adventures for him almost, and I would take pictures and I would show him where I'd been, because I also ran and did various errands for him. So for anyone who's traveled in India, running an errand can turn into an adventure real quick. But I am extremely grateful for for everything that I learned from him, all the adventures that I had, because I saw some things that I saw places and things that I definitely would have never seen if I had just gone to India on my own as a regular person. And it was absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, definitely. But when I had gone to India, I traveled with Yudhishthira and Radha. Yes. Yeah, I was just about to get into that actually. So right before, or just after, or when we went to India in February of last year, it was only a few months after I got out of the military. I served in the Navy on submarine. That particular environment can be very crude, and so it really, how do I put this? I was kind of degraded, I guess, and it's still a way I still am, but I was like really degraded, and I had a really short temper. It was not pretty. So I went to Vrindavan and started serving Gunagrahi Maharaj, and he trained me up pretty good. Right before I left for India, Yudhishthira Prabhu sent me a message asking if I'd be willing to serve Gunagrahi Maharaj in Vrindavan, and I didn't even think twice about it and I said yes right away because I knew it was coming straight from Yudhishthira Prabhu. So I said, yeah, no problem. Thank you very much, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Vaishnava Prabhu. We also have those who knew Gunagrahi Maharaj from many, many years ago, like family members who've since moved away but have come back to visit today. So Maitreya Prabhu, Hare Krishna. So nice to see you back here.
Om Jnanatimirandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I first saw the devotees chanting in Hawaii when I was 8 years old, and I wanted to go, and my mother wouldn't let me. And I always wanted to go join the devotees ever since then, but time was separating. So when I was in college, I wanted to be a doctor, and I made the mistake of going down in one of the basements of one of the buildings one time where they were doing animal experiments. And it so horrified me, and I went into a complete funk because I didn't want to have any part of that, and I became depressed, and became a vegetarian instantly also. And the veggie house on campus at Pomona College was populated with people who did not know how to cook. So we had dal without any spices and terrible salads, and I'd already made the determination I was going to do this. I was looking forward to a long, bleak life of terrible soup and bad salads. And this is getting around to the fact that Gunagrahi Maharaj, in his desire to preach, created something that didn't exist hardly anywhere else. It was a dinner program. I heard about the Sunday feast, but when you're eating food like I was eating on a Monday, Sunday is a long way away. Huh? Oh, this is 1979, 1978. So anyway, I began frantically researching where I could get harekrishna food without having to go to wait till Sunday. And I found out there's SanDiego, there's a dinner program. So I got my friends in the veggie house, and we all drove down here immediately. I said, we can't wait. We got to go right away. We have to have some. I can't eat this food anymore. And so this, as you can see, this masterpiece of a temple. So we walked in. The fountain is going, incense. The dinner program was so nicely laid out. There's rows with seats and little raised platforms with the prasadam on, and it was just so welcoming. Parikit Prabhu, I don't see him here today, but he greeted us at the door and showed us to our seats. So it was like so first class. We were welcomed. We sat down as like honored guests, and they served us prasadam, and then Parikit came by later and checked in with us, and Gunagrahi Maharaj was by the back just sort of overseeing the whole thing. So I didn't have anything to do with them that particular day. But I couldn't go back to school and eat that food anymore, so I was hooked. And also I'd been studying Zen and other dry philosophies, getting up early and taking cold baths and everything, but then there's no juice because there's no holy name. I was just trying to do Zen meditation. So my first Mangal Artik, I was standing right there in 1980, and Gunagrahi Maharaj was leading the kirtan, and he came behind me with a mridanga. And I looked around, and he had this big smile on his face. And the next thing I knew, I'm jumping up and down. When he played mridanga and chanted, he could get inanimate objects to dance in ecstasy. So that was it. A big smile on his face. And I was ready to, the Zen program is you offer obeisances in front of the temple for a week, and they pour cold water on you, and maybe if you can make it that long, they'll invite you in. So to just be invited into this whole spiritual world right away. And I was still in a depression from college. I was like Dukhi Krishnadas. I would burst out crying in kirtans and get in trouble and things. No one knew what depression was then. And I don't know if it's accepted as a mental illness in ISKCON now, but it was treatable. And I finally did get treated, and it made devotional service a lot easier. But in those days, no one knew why I was such a case. But Gunagrahi Maharaj would just spend time with me and just talk to me. Other devotees would threaten to kick me out of the temple, but Gunagrahi would just take a walk with me and just tell me everything would be okay. One time he said, just pray for the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, and you'll get it. So I'll finish up with just the one very wonderful memory I have. So the dinner program and the Mangal Artik was sort of the saving thing for me. And one of my services when I joined the temple was doing the dinner program, cooking. And there was pakoras and poppers and salad and sabji, I think, and things. And I was in charge of making the pakoras. And Gunagrahi, and I'm learning the recipes and just barely know what I'm doing. And Gunagrahi came in the kitchen and he said, "Don't be shy with the salt, Maitreya. Don't be shy with that salt." So he oversaw details. So he's in charge of big programs, but he was never afraid to. And sometimes if he got mad at you, later on he would come back and apologize. Like he had to chastise me for something. I don't remember what it was, but he would always. He wasn't a harsh person at all. He was soft. So if he had to say something harsh, correct you, he would come back and explain, So the relationship was never harmed. It was always increasing. Gunagrahi. Oh, and one thing about the Roth and his frugality. So I know now you've seen these bath sheet, these towels, big towels you can wrap around yourself. I mean, they're kind of nice. You can get nice and dry. But Gunagrahi Maharaj was against that philosophy. He cut the towels on the Roth. You remember those? To like the size of washcloths. So like you want to know what brahmachari life is like. You ride on a broken down Roth with these little tiny washcloths and you take cold baths. And it was bliss somehow. But anyway. Gunagrahi Maharaj ki jai.
Thank you, Maitreya Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Okay, and then Jyotir Prabhu. You'll have to give a little introduction. I don't know if everybody knows you here. Okay.
Nobody really knows me here. I had the good fortune of entering the Buffalo Temple back in 1972. Gunagrahi had just become temple president. He had just come back from, I think, New York, where he took second initiation. And there I was, and it was a very intimate, small temple, Buffalo, New York, in the winter, cold. We had sheets over the windows. We couldn't afford to really heat the place effectively. We went out and did our Sankirtan the best we could. He had his biggest push then was the preaching program at the University of Buffalo. That's where he got basically recruited and by Rupanuga, and it was a relatively successful program, but boy, it was cold and we struggled, and everybody had chapped hands, and you'd play the mridanga and you're pretty much bleeding. It was just a very austere but exciting time. Gunagrahi would get letters directly from Srila Prabhupada because he was an earlier intimate devotee, and guidance about our temple. It was very special. I remember when the dinner program, sometimes we could barely afford to put a nice Sunday feast out, but we did our best. We scrambled. We begged. We borrowed. We took money from book collection and did what we could, and had some very nice devotees. So it was very special to have that association with him. I remember he couldn't go with us when we sent our van to New Vrindavan for, I think, 4 of us to get our initiation. I was one of them. But he wanted to make his presence known, make the Buffalo Temple known. So in our van, there were 4 fledgling devotees, 2 big plastic garbage cans. I think one had sweet rice and the other one had halva. And just to make sure that our presence was known, we had a cow. He had purchased a cow from the dairy that we got our, unpasteurized fresh milk from. So we had this little calf that we presented to New Vrindavan, but, we had to drive from Buffalo to West Virginia with a cow, But he made sure that we were recognized, and through the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, who was there, it was known that we were the temple that brought the cow. And it was just coincidental. I mean, I haven't been active in the movement since those days, but it was just coincidental that I moved to SanDiego, and I come to visit the temple. Gunagrahi had just arrived here, and he always found a way to be compassionate with me and friendly, and would engage me in little things. He knew I wasn't, going to live in the temple or be an active devotee, but, come see this program with me. And so we'd go off in my car, and he'd show me what he was doing up the freeway with food distribution at the rest stop, or, tell me about this or that. And I'd always asked him, even back in the Buffalo days, what would it take to be a sannyasi? He goes, well, that's a lifelong goal to become a sannyasi. I said, well, are you going to become a sannyasi? I mean, he was married at the time and everything. He goes, no, probably not. I'm not a good enough devotee for that. Well, he was then, he is now, and he'll always be remembered with fondness and compassion. and intelligence. His like the programs that you're talking about that he did all over the world, the little things that he started in Buffalo had that same inspiration and that same sincerity. They may not have become a major program, but he never gave up what was right to follow in with Prabhupada's instructions, and he'll be missed.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Jyotir Prabhu. Yudhishthir Prabhu. Hare Krishna. You know, I was thinking of what to say for a while, and you know, there are just so many pastimes with Maharaj and so many things he's done that it was difficult and to figure out what to say. So I prayed, and my health's been rough. So if I'm incoherent, please forgive me. And if I cry, don't tell anybody because I don't want to ruin my rep. You know, throughout the last 40 years or since I've known Maharaj, you know, it didn't hit me till after he left, but rarely did I go a month or two without hearing from him or communicating with him, you know, and he never let me run too far, you know, and I really miss that now, you know. And first time I met Maharaj was at the old Thorn Street Temple, and up by the park, the one before this. And I went there, and I was living out in the hills, growing marijuana or doing something stupid, and that poster of Prabhupada had come out where Prabhupada was sitting, I think it's at Bhaktivedanta Manor, where he's sitting on the lawn, you know. And I was buying that poster, and Purusha Prabhu was selling me that poster. And they had this little storage space between the houses there, the two houses, or it was like a garage or a shed, some sort of go-down type thing. And I was buying it, and Maharaj walked in, and he was the temple president. He was in white. And he said, and Purusha said, Dr. Jeff's buying a poster of Prabhupada. And I was all puffed up, you know. And he said, and Maharaj goes, oh, you're attracted to Prabhupada? And I said, yes. And he said, boy, I wish I was. And he walked out. That kind of like set the mood for our relationship. You know, again, you are mouse, you know. And so after I had moved into Laguna Temple and was there when Prabhupada left his body, and then when I left there for a while, and then I came to SanDiego and Maharaj, and I moved in the Bhakta program with Irving. Dharma was the Bhakta leader. Gunagrahi Maharaj was overseeing everything, and it was Irving, myself, Vaikuntha, yeah, and then there was some other people coming and going, and yeah, we made those rooms up there. I remember that was our first thing. Like, Maharaj had us drywall in all those rooms that are upstairs, and those were nice times. You know, we went and preached we had Harinam every day downtown. Back before it was regentrified, before it was pretty rough down there, you know, and we did all kinds of stuff. And, you know, later I became, we started we started the system of the Bhakta program system, and we had a guest master. I remember the first one was an old Prabhupada Das. I think his name was Prabhupada Das. But I took over that position, and I started working closely with Maharaj and Dharma.
and we had a whole system there. Later we had the Bhakta marathons with, we were competing with Donavir, and there was points for things like shave-up points, stand overnight points. And at lunch we had the old school Prabhupada where we ate in a row across the temple, right down the temple here, And I could go into the Gunagrahi Maharaj, everybody knows how he loved prasadam, and we had cool prasadam back then. He came up one time, he wanted potato chips, So we would have, every day at lunch, we would have potato chips cooked in ghee and a salad. And what else? Was there anything else, Dharma? And hibiscus tea, maybe? But you'd set the ditto deans right next to the wok and just run it through, and they would drop in the wok, and that was our lunch. But anyway, that was a sideline. But Maharaj loved his prasadam, and anybody that knows him knows that, And he would miss certain foods, and then we'd have to get on it and figure out how to make them. And, I remember one time he wanted BLTs, so we got veggie bacon bits and made bread, and we ate about 12 BLTs. We used to do stuff like that. And then, of course, the pizza. He was the pizza acharya. He's the one who really introduced pizza to ISKCON. But I'm kind of skipping ahead. So I was with him when he got his first motorhome, and we went looking at for motorhomes for him, and we found the Vaikuntha Rath, which Rishabdev arranged to be paid for. And I remember in Maharaj, he had so much faith that, once he set his mind on doing something, you either had to get out of the way or get on board, because he was going to do it, And he would be looking, stuff like motorhomes, he would be looking for motorhomes before he knew where the money was coming for it. And I used to say, Maharaj, what are we doing, And if anybody shopped with Maharaj, it was like world famous among his. I remember one time, 2 weeks, every day, all day, looking for the perfect T-shirts for the Bhaktas in the Bhakta program. I mean, tedious all day long, going to all different spots. And that's how Maharaj was in his service to Prabhupada, He would do it right, And he didn't tolerate when things weren't. Like when devotees weren't looking properly, if they had like tears in their kurta, Maharaj would go and stick his finger in the tear and go, whoosh, rip it right off their back. That's back in the day. He was very heavy, Maharaj, at times, and heavier back in the day. We used to call him the gun, because he was so heavy. And if he was in a bad mood, you'd tell him, hey, Prabhu, watch out, the gun's loaded. And back in those days, I was a pretty heavy person. I had come off, I was kind of a street guy, and a lot of devotees, they stayed away from me. But Maharaj, he loved me and always wanted me around. And I remember if I went off or something, he loved it. He'd just sit there and laugh at me, and make me so mad till it all ran out, And let me see. He got that first motorhome. I traveled on that for a while. We did that, what Pavamana was talking about. I didn't think Pav was there when I was on there, when he first got it. Were you there when we first got that, Russ? Yeah. And we did that circuit, the Tucson, Phoenix, Flagstaff, and that's where, and then sometimes we go out to like Denver or somewhere, or, drive Prabhupada Das, Bhakti Nick at the time, I remember driving him up to the farm that was in Denver because he wanted with his family to surrender. But we used to see Prabhupada Das and his brother up in Flagstaff. We'd go to Albuquerque, made devotees from there. Parikit Prabhu came from Albuquerque. And we used to do, at that time, we would go to the Sunday feast on Sunday night. Monday morning, we'd head out on the road. We'd head to Tucson. We'd go to the colleges and start distributing books, having bhajan, preaching, inviting people to a program. Now there was this devotee named Jerry who lived there in Tucson. And we would have a program at night at Jerry's. And Pop was there sometimes at Jerry's. Yeah, because I remember a pastime with... Oh, yeah, I don't know. Well, that fair was really far out. It was a street fair in Tucson. You have certain kirtans where you remember, and it was just so sweet. Well, that day we went to this street fair that happened once a year, and we were making the meal that you said, the pakoras and the cabbage, and But we were making mainly pakoras at that, and we were making them on the top of this little motorhome oven, and then we would stuff them in the oven and leave the oven on to keep them warm. So the whole oven was just full of pakoras. You'd have to open it and go like that, you know. But we distributed so much prasadam and so many people, and it was just, we were so intoxicated on, you know, and at the end, it was like everything died down, and we had this bhajan, and it was, I mean, I know this is mundane, but it reminds me of like the end of Woodstock when Jimi Hendrix is playing and no one's there, you know. But it was like, I mean, it was a real deal. We had the sweetest kirtan ever, you know. It was just beyond. Remember, Pop? And then, oh, I'd have to tell that whole story. Huh? Anyway, there was a guy there that had been beat up another time by devotees because he threatened to attack Pav. And then when he at the end of that, that's a story, another story. But at the end of that, so we're sitting there chanting, and this guy walks up, you know, and same guy a year later or so, you know. I don't know, it must be a Bhagavatam quality story that this guy got beat up every time he saw devotees. But you know, he came up, and there was Nirguna, who was a Prabhupada disciple, was there, and then the guy got hit again because he wanted to attack us, you know. But anyway, I said that because Pav wanted me to say that, and but that was it was real sweet, those preaching, you know. You know, Maharaj, he was an innovator, you know. He was the first one to do an all-you-can-eat restaurant in ISKCON, you know. He was the first one. Now everybody does them. He was the very first. Before Laguna. Laguna did it later, after, you know, and he developed that. He helped develop the Bhakti programs to a science. He had the science of the Sunday feast. You know, everything was in order, you know. When we did I was with him when we developed the dinner program, and he had a whole science to that, you know. We'd have preachers out there, and we'd have the guest master would stand there and get to know someone. Then we would designate the Sunday feast. We'd have the guest master out there. We'd greet the new people. We know who was really good. Then we had our little army of preachers, and we would meet them and say, okay, you go after him, you go to that person, this lady, like that. It was all it was down to a science, you know. And the dinner program was like that too. Back in those days, you know, they were allowed to drink on the beach down in Mission Bay and stuff, and it was very very Wild West like, you know. And so we get a lot of miscreants coming to the temple, you know. And so Maharaj we had this code, you know. And if someone was just like causing a scene or stunk too bad or something, you know, or something, Maharaj would tell me TAWC, and he'd point me at it. That meant take a walk, chump. He'd say, you TAWC. Maharaj would mostly come in and he'd tell the person, we'd know the person's name, just some homeless guy or something named Joe, say, and he'd say, is your name Joe? He says, you got a phone call out there. And you go, I got a phone call? He said, nobody knows I'm here. I don't know, Joe, and they described you, you know. And then we get them out so they didn't cause a scene inside, you know. Yeah, the dinner program was really nice preaching, you know. He did the prasadam distribution at rest stops. When he was developing that, I remember he had everybody out in the parking lots with cakes. Were you doing that, Lottie? Were you there then? And he made these cakes out of halava at first. I mean, they were really heavy, man. I mean, like, you know, if you can't sleep at night, you could eat one of those, sleep for 3 days. And it was just packed with sugar. And I think we were getting USDA, you know, because we had a dinner program. We had I think at the time we had a Food for Life, and so we were getting all this stuff from the USDA. And they were giving us cornmeal, so he'd make cornmeal halava, and then we had this cakes made and with this just sugary frosting on them, you know. But that morphed into the rest stop thing, where devotees distributed tons of prasadam out there, and yeah, and his motorhome preaching, you know, I think he was the first to do a motorhome too. I'm not sure though. Not positive about that. And he was such a good preacher, you know, because he was a friend to everyone, like Pavamana said. You know, Maharaj didn't just give lectures, you know. He connected with everyone. You know, he became your friend. He cared about you. And everywhere he went around the world, it was like that. You know, he was family, you know. He'd get to know people, you know. And he was expert at home programs. I learned how to do home programs from Maharaj, you know. Even when I was really out of it and stuff, Maharaj would introduce me to older devotees and say, Yudhishthir's a preacher, you know. He was kind of like willed me to be a preacher. And he used to sometimes tell you I was his best friend, too. And Prajendra Kumar and I were able to go see him before he left. You know, for Maharaj I had gone in to Mumbai a few years back when he was in Bangalore, and then with Pav and I went to Bangalore, and then Mumbai at the Bhaktivedanta Hospital and spent a few weeks with him there. And he was going through kind of a rough time, he had kind of a reaction to some medication he was taking, you know. And it was really nice to serve him there. I remember he told me, because I was serving him nice, humbly serving him and stuff, changing his, you know, his bedpan and stuff like that. And he told me, he goes, you just stare, and he laughed at me. He said, it's almost worth being sick to see you do this. And, you know, Maharaj he didn't compare, you know. He didn't say, well, I'm doing this. I'm getting up early, this devotee isn't, or I'm doing this and this devotee. He wasn't like that at all. Ranath Maharaj once told me that advanced devotee only sees the spiritual potential in somebody, and Maharaj was like that, you know. He just loved everybody, and he was so tolerant. And it's not easy preaching to Westerners, and Maharaj did that in a big way from the beginning, you know, because we're not real cultured, you know, and there's not a lot of gratitude sometimes. And I know that, you know, I didn't show. A lot of times I would try to hide from Maharaj because he always tried to pour a bunch of service on me, you know. And I couldn't say no to him. Later I learned when I was here doing it, I finally was able, we had this moment, you know, where I was doing a bunch of service I was doing the chakra groups and stuff, and he came and he tried to get me, you know, and I told him, Marley, you just can't do it. And he got mad at me, and then half an hour later, everything was cool, you know. And Maharaj was like, I looked at him as my friend, you know, and my father. We used to joke and call him Dad, and he liked it, you know, like me and Brudge and the guys, you know. I used to send him Father's Day cards, and he liked it. And he knew it was a pun, but it wasn't, you know, like that. And he liked them, and he used to thank me. And then I remember one time we were in Baltimore and going to see his mother and father, you know. And he got real heavy with me. He said, Yudhishthir, don't say that you're my father in front of my mother. He was really scared of his Jewish mother, you know. He was sick. He would like get real prepped and not cough when he talked to her because he'd say that she would just like be all over him, you know. And he had a real nice mother. And we used to go to his father and mother's place. They were in this, in Baltimore, they were in this very high-end old people's home, you know. They had a little hospital on the bottom, but it was really uptown, and Maharaj would go stay there, you know. And then after his mother left, we would go there when his father was there, and we would make pizza in that house. And I remember we used to have to, one person would have to, because they had the smoke detectors set so low because I guess old people burn their houses down a lot. And so we used to have to wave it with a towel, you know, to keep it cool. So because and Maharaj was fearless, you know. He was really fearless, you know. He did, and that made him such a powerful preacher because of that. He was, you know, he would go anywhere, and he wasn't scared. You know, he wasn't. I'd be scared, you know. I mean, or one time he came to me and he said, this is back when they were still drank on the beach down there. He said, Yudhishthir, he said, we're going on Harinam. I said, everybody said, no, just you and me, you and I, we're going to go pass out invitations, you know. And so he takes me down to Mission Beach in the middle of the summer, the boardwalk, you know, down there when everybody drank. I mean, it was no man's land down there. And a lot of people knew me there. They called me the watchdog of the Harekrishna temple, and they would come gunning for me because I had beat up their friends when they tried to, you know, vandalize the temple or something. But yeah, it was scary, man. But it was the most ecstatic Harinam I ever was on. I mean, just him and I passing out invitations, and Maharaj chanting, and people were spitting on us and throwing stuff at us, and Maharaj would just whisper at me every once in a while, stay calm, Edie, don't do anything, he'd say, you know. And yeah, Maharaj was so fearless. Another time, this is pretty far out, Lileshwar, I don't know if you guys remember Lileshwar, Indian body devotee. We took him out of Arizona State, I think, and drove him back. And his parents just didn't like it at all. You know, he was going to be an engineer or something, you know. And they were upset, you know. So they kidnapped him from the temple. And they brought him to his house in Maryland. And all the family members were there deprogramming him, you know. Telling him, they got to keep care of your parents, you know. And so Maharaj and I think we went, Brudge got the money for tickets for us for Jindra, and we flew out there. I think we flew, if I may have this wrong, but I think we flew to D.C. first, to the Potomac Temple. And we got this Vietnam vet that was a taxi driver in D.C., you know, perfect combination for our driver, you know. And we went out there, and we were talking to Lileshwar on the phone, and we drove out to this house in Maryland out in the middle of nowhere, and we sat out there, and then we lifted up the hood of the car like our car was broken, like right across the street from the house. And then we somehow had to figure out, and Lileshwar darts out the house and jumps in the car, and there's like a pack of wild Indians chasing him. And we had this high-speed chase across Maryland. I mean, it was insane. I would sit in the front, Maharaj was preaching to Lileshwar in the back seat. And whatever I said, this driver did. So we'd be driving through these old streets that everything was a blind intersection. If I said turn left, he just turned left, you know. I wish I knew his name, or he was far out, you know. He was, you know, kind of a hardcore Vietnam vet that was, you know, had some heavy combat experience. But we were going down the wrong way on the expressway. We were turning on. You know, we would get like almost to an overpass, and we would turn right through the grass and go up the median and get on. And we lost everybody. There was about 8 cars behind us or something. And by the end, we had this one guy that just wouldn't give up, you know, this young Indian gentleman. And yeah, we finally lost him. But the chase went on for about 4 hours or something like that. And we were breaking every law in the book and every law of nature, too. We should have been killed because, like I said, you're going through these old towns and these one-way streets, and we're going the wrong way, and there's cross streets, and we're not even stopping for these blind intersections, you know. And then we ended up in Baltimore, and then we flew back from there with Lileshwar, you know. So, and Maharaj, he was tough as nails. Okay. You know, when Raj and I were in India, you know, a few weeks before he left, and we were there for 3 weeks, and Maharaj had made me promise that I would be there when he left, you know, but I just had a feeling we should go in July, you know, and it was pretty empty there. You know, it was really hot, so, you know, Vrindavan gets a little thin at that time, and so we got a lot of it would just be us hanging out with him, and Maharaj loved, you know, he loved to laugh, you know, I mean, we were yucking it up, and he'd just be rolling and laughing. Sometimes we walk in there and he'd go, no, you guys, no jokes today. We can't do jokes. Got to be serious. Then we'd be chanting for a while, and he'd say, okay, one joke. And we were reminiscing about all these pastimes, and it was really sweet, you know, I mean, it was really sweet. And you know, I started wondering, Maharaj was still kind of, and this was a crucial time in Maharaj's journey because, I mean, watching the whole thing of him when he got sick, and then the events that happened, you knew that Krishna was, if there was anything left in there, any materialized, Krishna was squeezing them out, you know, and he was arranging these perfect arrangements for it. And I really watched, and I tell him, I say, Maharaj, this is so cool. It's like Bhagavatam quality stuff. And he'd say, yeah, for you. So like that. But he appreciated it and he laughed, you know, because it was so nice, you know. I mean, you could see how Krishna was. And then Gunagrahi Swami let him stay at his house for years, you know. And Maharaj, you know, he's the epitome of in like a needle and out like a plow. But Gunagrahi Swami says, yeah, whatever we call him, when you want to change the shower around, no problem, whatever you need to do, you know. And then, you know, when he was there, he had this whole, you know, I remember Maharaj once telling me a few years back, he said, you know, I got to quit being in so much anxiety. And I laughed. I said, Maharaj, you love anxiety. You live for anxiety. Because he didn't, you know, he would push his service till it seemed like he couldn't do it, you know. He would complicate it to that point. And I think that's where he liked to stay, because that was where the real mercy was. You know, he was stepping beyond. And it was, I don't know how he did it, you know. He was just, he loved to preach and do his preaching in such a way that he was pushing it beyond, you know, the limits, you know, and that's what he liked. That was who Maharaj was, a warrior, you know. He definitely was a Kshatriya type person, you know. He was fearless and he just did that. And then when he was there, because he was such a great manager, and that's what he did, you know, and he preached, even when he was there at Gunagrahi Maharaj's ashram, he, you know, he had this whole kirtan organized every night. He had this big thing happening every night. And then he had prasadam feasts on Ekadasi. And I said, just see, Maharaj, you can't, you know, he had his little thing, and it was all preaching, you know. It was all preaching. And they were really sweet kirtans, really sweet. And yeah, you couldn't stop Maharaj. And I was a little confused sometimes. I was thinking, you know, because at that time, he was kind of in this transition period, and it was a heavy time for him. And he was still somehow fighting to try to stay, you know. And I finally got this realization. I was reading the Bhagavatam, and it said, Prabhupada was talking about the Gostiyanandi and the Bhajananandi, how the Bhajananandi, you know, stays and chants, the Gostiyanandi goes out. And Prabhupada says he takes that risk, he said, Prabhupada. And that was Maharaj. He took the risk, you know. And he didn't want to, my point was, he didn't want to stay because he wanted to, like me, you know, enjoy my senses. He wanted to stay because he wanted to go back on the battlefield and fight, you know. And anyway, I think that's about it. Oh, right before he left, Reggie and I were in his room the day we were leaving. We were hanging for a while, and he goes, "Can you guys stay?" And we said, "Yeah, okay." And then we realized later he was saying, "Stay," you know, in Vrindavan, you know. Well, we were like looking at each other, like, I said, "Maharaj, we can't really stay," you know. Rod and I are moving, and then, but the day before he had said he wanted to go into hospice, you know. He said he wanted to go to hospice, and everybody was a little shocked, you know. And then when I got back, he called me the day after I got back and told me to asked me to come back, you know. And we had to move and stuff, and so I felt kind of bad about that. So I hope Maharaj forgives me. And that's all. Hare
Krishna, thank you very much, Yudhisthira Prabhu. Radha Priyad?
Hare Krishna. First of all, I want to thank everyone who's shared their memories and their pastimes with Maharaj, especially Yudhisthira for telling the full story about Leelashwar's kidnapping. Leelashwar and I were in the Bhakti program together, and I had actually never heard the full story before. But and the only reason I'm mentioning this is that Leelashwar has said to me on many occasions, including recently, "Gunagrahi Maharaj saved my life." And he really felt that way. He lives in India now, and I know he would wish to be here. And I know he'd be very happy to hear about everyone coming for Gunagrahi Maharaj because he felt a very special debt to him. Being in a woman's body, I don't have a lot of pastimes with Gunagrahi Maharaj, but I can tell you a couple of quick things. There's been a picture up here of Maharaj's sannyasa initiation, and he's sitting there, and then Tripurari Maharaj, and then I believe Radhanath Swami is right next to him. That was the first time I ever saw Gunagrahi Maharaj. I had been coming to the temple, that was in 1983. I had been coming for a couple of months, hanging around Sunday Feast. I had discovered the dinner program, which was amazing, a wonderful preaching tool. And so I came to the dinner program a couple of times a week. I always came to the Sunday Feast. And one day, the women said, "Oh, you have to come tomorrow morning. You have to be here at 5. I'm like, really? And wear a sari. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Because I owned a sari, but I actually had never, Jayashree probably remembers this, actually. I didn't even know why I was coming, but they said, you have to be here at 5. Very special day. So I get here at 5 in the morning. I get this sari I don't know how to wear. And so I went in the women's ashram, which was down the street, a few houses, and somebody dressed me up, and we came in here, and there's this big thing, and I realized they're going to light a fire in this building. And I was, maybe I was chanting 1 round a day. I mean, I was a vegetarian. I was already, on board a little bit, but not a clue what was going on. Well, it was Maharaj's sannyasa initiation. And I had no idea what sannyas was or what it meant, or these guys holding the sticks, or, somebody going to get beat. I had no clue. That was my mentality when I came in here. And I kept saying, how much longer does this go? I have to go to work. Oh, just another hour. Okay, just another hour. And so I'd call into the office every so often, and I finally made it to work about 1 in the afternoon with a plate of prasadam and reeking of the smoke of a fire sacrifice. So who knows what they thought, but 6 months, about 6 months after I started coming, so it'd be probably another 4 months, I moved into the temple. And Dharmasetu was running the Bhakti program, and Gunagrahi Maharaj was here, all the time. And we didn't have a lot of contact with him, but I remember one specific thing. One day, we had regular Bhakti classes. We went out on Harinam. We had a very structured life, which was really nice because it was how we learned everything, how we were trained up, and we learned how to preach, and we learned how to give class, and we learned how to do kirtan. And one day, we were told, Gunagrahi Maharaj is coming up at 11 o'clock, so everybody better be in their seats, ready to go. And now we had Bhakti class. If you go up this outer stair, there's a room right there. And that was the only room in the temple the women were allowed into upstairs because you could get to it from outside, so that was our classroom. And we were told, make sure you're on time, nobody late, be there, Maharaj is going to come in, and we're having a special program. And we're all like, oh, wow, Gunagrahi Maharaj is a special program, and we're thinking some big, heavy lecture, or we didn't know what was going to happen. So we're all in our spot, and we're having a little kirtan or something, and all of a sudden we hear, here comes Maharaj. And here he comes up the outer steps, and in his hand is a tray of pizza that he had made himself, and he's got 1 or 2 guys behind him with more trays of pizza. That was the special program, was we got Maharaj's pizza. Yeah, that's probably pretty good. And I never forgot that. And of course I was a devotee. I was like, wow, we get to eat pizza still? That's cool. And but Maharaj, he taught us how to eat pizza properly, how it should be cooked properly, none of this big, thick crust, sloggy stuff. It had to be thin and crisp, and if you held it and it didn't stay straight out, it wasn't pizza. So that was one of the few things I really remembered about being around Maharaj. But yeah, he was always preaching. Food distribution was really big, and at one point I made a lot of the cakes before Mother Lodley came and made really good cakes. But I made a lot of the cakes back in the day, and one time they said, oh, we need a birthday cake for Gunagrahi Maharaj. And I'm like, well, how do I, decorate it for us. And what we ended up doing was basically painting with food coloring, and I created a Food for Life truck. And we found a little picture that I cut out, and we put it, so Maharaj was like this in the driver's seat. And he loved it. It was tangerine. I remember that because he wanted tangerine. That was one of the few services. I did a little bit of sewing for him over the years too, as well, but he was just such a special person. He was such a special person and such a force at this temple. I mean, he's still a force at this temple, even though he hadn't been here in many years. But he's affected so many of us. Padmana, I know you have wonderful stories. I mean, all the older devotees, the people who were here when I came, and thank you for sharing him with those of us who were younger, and especially thank you for sharing your remembrances. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Radhapriya Devi Dasi. Okay, Brajendra Kumar, Prabhu.
I didn't really prepare, but we'll start with my first memory. My first memory of Maharaj was after Mahatma Prabhu and Mahatseva moved down to SanDiego, they were coming up and doing a regular program at my home. That they're the first devotees I ever met out of New Dwarka. And then they moved to SanDiego, and they started coming up in the Vaikuntha Rath with a lot of devotees. And we'd have these wonderful programs and a lot of people, Maharaj and Mahatma Prabhu. But the first time I met him, he was there alone. I welcomed him in, and he was sitting on the couch, and he told me later he was thinking, oh, well, this is a very nice family. And then my oldest Janaki, she was little, she came walking into the living room, and Maharaj sitting there, and he looks at her and says, hi, can you say Hare Krishna? And Janaki, if you know her, everyone knows she's a very sweet person. She looks at him and says, nah, and runs back down the hall. Uncharacteristic. And then Maharaj and Mahatma Prabhu, they were saying, come to SanDiego and give up whatever. And so I moved to SanDiego, and then my memory's very bad, but the next time I really remember getting, this is the start of our real relationship, I think we were the first Lucchese, the restaurant, and I was longshoring up there in Wilmington, so I'd go back and forth, and Kesha Prabhu was there, Big Kesha, and we had to transform the place. It was a hair salon or something. So it was months. But I remember Maharaj read everything for months that Srila Prabhupada ever said about prasadam distribution. And that someone, I think, who was saying the first all you can eat, because Maharaj said that Srila Prabhupada said, we're not businessmen, we're in the business of distributing prasadam. So it was all you can eat for a low price. Maharaj said that Srila Prabhupada said high volume, low profit. And the point I'm making is he studied everything Prabhupada said. It took him months, and then he came up with this formula. And it was so successful. The locals were waiting for us to open, and for the first weeks we were open, there was long lines for waiting for lunch and dinner. And then I got to travel with Maharaj on the Rath. And just memories, walking in New York. I forgot, just me and him were going somewhere, and there was a short period where somehow or another Maharaj uses mystic potency and had me put on saffron for a little while. Didn't last very long, but we were walking, and he says, he knew me so well, and he's, Braj, sometimes the sidewalk is brahmachari's best friend. And he had so many sayings. Sometimes when it was a hard day, he would say, Raj, it's a long way back home. He's probably speaking, just, he knew me so well. Everyone's speaking how Maharaj didn't discriminate. How he'd be so kind to everybody, no matter where, who they were. And my hometown, when we were doing the first restaurant, you know, I'd have to go up there to work, and we were using, you know, Maharaj was engaging me so that I could use the Lakshmi to help with the rest, by the rest. But when I'd leave, he'd say, okay, when are you coming back? How long will you be? And I'd give him amount of days, and it would always inevitably turn longer. And so when Maharaj was going to take me, and him and Tripurari Swami were going to take me on this world tour that Tripurari Swami had got invited to go to different temples around the world. So we were getting it all together, and when we were going to go to San Francisco to get our visas, I told Maharaj, well, we got to stop in Wilmington. It'll just be a day. My sister Debbie will stay at her house just a night, Maharaj. and you know, I'll get things together. Then so he said, all right. And he went with me. Yudhishthira was talking about him being fearless. This Wilmington is not it's sort of dark and a dark place. And Maharaj ended up being there like about 9 days with me. And staying at my sister's, and he would, you know, I'd be gone all day, and he'd be at my sister's. He made a bunch of barrels of pizza, that made a lot of the crust, and then a big thing of the sauce. And my whole family and friends, they all had pizza for quite a while after we were gone. But he would do things like, you know, he'd be there all day. So, you know, my sister Debbie, it's before she moved to SanDiego, and he would. She had cassette tapes, and Maharaj, I guess, was looking through them one day, and he found a Prince, you know, Prince, the singer. And so Debbie, after Maharaj is gone, my sister Debbie is listening to this tape, and it plays for a while, and then all of a sudden she hears Maharaj's voice. Bhakti Devi, this isn't Krishna conscious music. You shouldn't be listening to this. He was just so wonderful. He would endear everybody to him with his love and humor. And you know, he just over the years he gave. Oh, about that story, him staying there. So after we were leaving Wilmington, and he had been there for a lot longer than I told him, he said, "So Bhajendra, I know now why every time you leave, you don't come back when you say you're going to, because Wilmington is a fourth mode. It's deeper and darker than all the other modes, and when it sucks you in, you just can't get back out." So he used to like to tell that story about the fourth mode. But even though there's so many people that came out of that town and that are appreciative of devotees, Parvat Munis, but Maharaj didn't. He would walk around Wilmington in his robes, and everybody really loved him. Still, to this day, people love him. He was always giving mercy to all of us. My youngest son, Dharmaraj, is his initiated disciple. Probably everyone here remembers the wonderful initiation that day. It was like a big, giant family. Traveling with him in the Rath was. He always knew how to deal with me. No matter what came out of my mind, he would know how to give me encouragement and show that he really cared about me and loved me. So then, like Yudhishthira was saying, Krishna was so kind to let us go and spend time with him at Giriraj Swami's house. That was so kind of you, Maharaj, to take care of him like that. And Yudhishthira was saying it was a critical time because, you know, all of you know Maharaj, he sets his mind to something and that's it. And his mind was set to get better and go out and serve Srila Prabhupada. And when we got there, I mean, I'd been there a few months before with my son, Dharmaraj, and he looked sick then, but when we got there this last time, I couldn't believe the change. He looked like a skeleton with skin on it. He was very weak, talked real low, except when he wanted to make a point. But he was still going to get well. He was doing all these different treatments, but it was sort of obvious. It didn't seem like he was going to get well. So it was Krishna's real supreme mercy to let us be there, because he was so kind. He used to he would call me his pal. He let me call him my pal. But he was, because Yudhisthira's been his friend for much longer, but he treated us like friends so that we were able to be truthful with him, and I think he really appreciated, because he stopped focusing on getting well and realized that it was time to do the needful. He always said, do the needful. Anyways, like most of us here, I'll always be indebted, and hopefully I can go and serve him somewhere after this, wherever he's at. All right. Gunagrahi Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Brajendra Kumar. Leela Sara.
Hare Krishna. So I met Gunagrahi Maharaj in the latter part of 1974 over by Balboa Park, and I hadn't gone to the Third and Thorn Temple yet when I first met the devotees. They were handing sticks of incense out and some sweets, and I wouldn't take the sweets. I was afraid that they were laden with acid or something, because I didn't want to be jumping around like them and wearing clothes like them. But one time I was offered the stick of incense. I wouldn't ever take the sweets week after week. And so I took the incense and kept that for a while, for the day. And then I kept watching the devotees, and I remember it was so strange, because obviously there were new devotees, and it's in the 1974, and so I was watching them in Balboa Park do leapfrog, and just like the men and the women, and they were playing leapfrog on the grass, and I really knew I wasn't going to go play leapfrog, but that was just something that was stopped, obviously, and it was just for the day, and they didn't know what they were doing. They were new devotees, and then I still hadn't gone to the Third and Thorn inside. I sat on the curb outside and just observe, and then follow with the Harinam in the park, always staying very far away, observing, not wanting to be seen as one of them. And then there was Srila Prabhupada came, and there was a room, a hall that was rented in Balboa Park, and I remember going and sitting on the top of the stairs. So I was on the top of the stairs. I don't know if anybody is here that was there. I think it's called the Casa del Prado. And I didn't want to go in, once again, didn't want to be seen. So I went up on the stairs, and I was looking down at everybody. I saw Srila Prabhupada walk by. And Maharaj came back out. He had seen me up there because he had seen me a few times, but I never spoke to him before. And he And he looked up on the stairs and he said, come in, you have to come in. You'll miss out on everything. You'll miss out on eternal life if you don't come in. and I hesitated for a minute. He saw that hesitation. He said, come down and come in. And I did. I went in there, and then everyone's running back and forth in this hall. And there was Gornitai deities. I think they were Gornitai deities that were there. And everybody was so happy. And I'm just like this 14-year-old girl, scared, should have been home. And I didn't want to eat anything. Again, I'm still thinking that they're got to be on something. But then the feast was being served, and I sat down, and I wouldn't eat anything. It was yellow, and but this carob pudding went on the plate. Maharaj was serving the carob pudding, and so he said, taste that, you have to eat that. And I took a bite, and it was so good, and he smiled really big, and he said, I knew that would get you. And so he sent me, there was a change of the Thorn Street temple being sold, and this one, there was a long stretch of time, and he would come to my house and speak to my mother. I was a minor, and before I knew it, my mother was signing over guardianship to him. He became my legal guardian, and he sent me to Hawaii when all this transition was happening. I was there for about 2.5 years. I came back and to see this, and got to help do a lot of painting and sewing, a lot of sewing. All the outfits were remade for the deities. And then there was a need of service in Miami, and then he sent me to Miami, and I didn't really want to be there. I wanted to be here, but I stayed there for a while and came back. And when I came back from Miami, there was a lot of devotees here. There was brahmacharis, 40-something brahmacharis here, and so many women, and then we all started having babies, and there was just babies on mats lined around the temple at nighttime, and brahmacharis, Maharaj leading kirtan, and I could still picture his feet, the way it is, his feet. And the whole temple was just, the classes were amazing. I remember Dharma Setu, he would sit up here during prasadam time, during breakfast, and there was always, Dharma Setu would read while we were all eating, and I would bring all the kids here at lunchtime, and it was like every program, no devotee missed one program, morning, all the morning program. We were here, Mangal Arati, for Srila Prabhupada's Guru Puja, and the evening program, we didn't miss any programs. We were here, book distribution was amazing, and the Hari Nams, and I love going on Hari Nam. That was probably my favorite service to do with Maharaj, and there was a few times when, I became a mother, and it's very hard to, I did stay in the ashram, the Bhaktin ashram, with my first child. I was allowed to stay there, and but just going to all the different, coming and going and losing houses, and I would go to my mother's house, and he would drive to my mother's house and get me and bring me back so many times. One time the Roth, I don't know who was driving it, but the Roth came right down the street to my mother's house. She came right out, don't you let any of them get out of that motorhome. I don't want the neighbors to see you. And Maharaj would always have to assure her that everything was okay. And then Brajapadu and my mother became good friends also. And just very thankful for him, because he was and is my life. I wouldn't be Leelasara if it wasn't for him. Hare Krishna.
Krishna. Thank you, Leela Sara. Mother Lalali.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Guru Krishna and Nimai, they have an amazing amount of plumerias that grow on their property called plumeria loca.
offer to their lordship, but they wanted to offer this garland to Guru Maharaj. I can do that nicely.
I don't want to burn it. Hare Krishna, everyone. It's so nice to be here and see all the beautiful devotees here, and so many devotees that I feel very close to and that have been nurturing me since my early 20s. So it was a very peculiar way how I met Gunagrahi Maharaj. I first met Bhakta Mitch up in Oceanside at the cookie table. I was driving down from Los Angeles and I met Mitch, and then he invited me to come to the temple. So I was coming to the temple, and any money he had collected from the cookie table, they had these cookies like 3 for $1, big, huge cookies, carob chip, peanut butter, oatmeal cookies, and they were selling them and serving like grain coffee up there. And so all the money he would collect, he would have to give it to Gunagrahi Maharaj. But every time Maharaj would come to the apartment down here along the boardwalk, Mitch would always say, "You stay in here in the house. I need to go talk to Maharaj." And I said, "Well, what is a Maharaj?" And I would always hear them talking outside, and I could always hear Maharaj saying, "Mitch, I need the money. I need all the money. I need it now." And he goes, "Okay, this is all I collected today." So this was going on for a few weeks. And I remember one time I peeked out the door to see who Maharaj was, and I didn't see his face. It was raining, it was dark, it was his back, and I still didn't know who Maharaj was. And then I was coming to the Sunday feast. This is 1983. I think I was like 23 years old. I was coming to the Sunday feast, and Mitch would bring me. And one Sunday feast, Gunagrahi Maharaj came up to Mitch. I still didn't know who he was. Maybe it was in the back. And he asked Mitch, he said, "Can you and your friend go up to Leucadia and wash the pots? We don't have a pot washer." And so then Mitch approached me and says, "Maharaj would like us to go up and wash the pots." I says, "I don't even know who Maharaj is. I don't know what a Maharaj is." And so we went up there. I was a little angry driving up to Leucadia after the whole Sunday feast because it's at least a 30-minute drive north. So we went up there and we washed pots till like 2 o'clock in the morning. We were exhausted. We ended up spending the night in the audio-visual room there. And then Maharaj asked him to do it for a couple more days. So we ended up doing it. It became more of a service for a couple months. And I remember I was asleep on the audio-visual room floor, and the Roth devotees, I think it was Giri Yadava and Valmiki, and there was like 6 or 7 of them, but they would come into the restaurant for the Mangal Arti. Well, I'd been up washing pots till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I was asleep, and Maharaj would come in, and they would do the whole Mangal Arti and the prayers, and they would come in, and Maharaj, right over my head, he would bang the kartals, "Jeev Jago, Jeev Jago." I was like, "What's a Jeev Jago?" And that went on for 3 mornings, and I thought, "Oh God, if this happens again, I'm going to leave, So the 4th morning it happened, and I got up super early. I got the pots washed. I got up super early, and I got dressed, appropriately as possible. And I was there right at the Mangal Arti, and he just looked at me and he's like, "Oh, it's working." And I found cartels, and I didn't know it was 1, 2, 3. I just started banging the cartels like this. And he told one of the devotees, he said, "Get those away from her," because I didn't know how to play the cartels. And so just over the years, over the course of 30 years, our relationship developed, and he was coming and going. I'd never been anywhere with Maharaj outside of SanDiego, Laguna Beach, or LA. I always knew him here, and us devotees were the ones caring for him. And then Yudhisthira was very sly and tricky, how he made me feel so wonderful to host Maharaj. So I don't know, maybe you were ill or you weren't feeling well. He says, "Oh, can you host Maharaj? It's just so much nectar to take care of him. You can cook for him." I said, "Okay." So then that became our service. He stayed at our home dozens and dozens of times. And I remember one time, the first time he came to my kitchen, he goes like this, "Okay, let's see how this kitchen flows." And he goes, "We're going to make cottage cheese." And I said, Maharaj, I have a better idea. I can just go to the grocery store and we'll buy some cottage cheese. And he said, no, we're going to make some cottage cheese. And so he had the recipe, we're making the cottage cheese, and it's taken us a long time for the whole process to work. And then he looks at it, he goes, this is not right, and he throws it out. And then we did it again. I think we 3 or 4 times we made cottage cheese, and he goes, okay, now this is right. This is what we're looking for. So we had a lot of cooking pastimes. He was, when my daughter was going to we started a little preschool at our home, a little Gurukul preschool with 4 or 5 families, and he was there for the inauguration. We had a little fire ceremony, and Katamrita was helping the kids write their names in the rice, and Maharaj was right there and encouraging us, and how important it was to raise these children in Krishna consciousness. And another time, he always, I'm trying to get the chronological order right, he always wanted to be with Mother Vrajabadu when she passed away. It was so important to him, because whenever he would come back to SanDiego, he would stay with us, and then he goes, let's go read with Vrajabadu. So I'd drive him, and we would read together with her. And we did that a few dozen times, reading with Mother Vrajabadu over at her home, and then in the nursing home, and then the care home, we would read with her. And I remember one time, every time Maharaj came to our home, there was a little bell on my altar, and he loved this bell. He said, this is the nicest sounding bell I've ever heard. And 6 or 7 times when he'd come, he'd say, this bell is so beautiful. I go, oh God, I got to give it to him. He really wants it. So finally, after I was brave enough to reconcile, I need to give this to him. He's really, without asking me directly, he's let me know indirectly he would really like it. So I wrapped it up and I gave it to Mother Vrajabadu, and I said, Mother Vrajabadu, when you see Gunagrahi Maharaj today, maybe you would like to give this to him as a gift. And she goes, yeah, that's nice. I would love to give that gift to him. And he opened it up, and I have a picture of him. He has a huge smile on his face, and he's ringing the bell. He said, Ladli, I love this bell so much. And he ended up taking it to Buenos Aires to the Pujari there. He says the head Pujari uses it for the deities there. And it's very interesting how he was there from the very beginning all the way through till the end. So we're talking a course of 30, 35 years. And when my mother passed away, we were going to host him, and it was scheduled for us to host him. And I said, Maharaj, I never like to say no to him. I always, as much as I could, I would want to help. And I said, Maharaj, I'm so sorry I can't host you. My mother is going to be passing away any time, and it's just not a good time. And he said, no, I understand, and I won't be able to do any home programs. And so they made an arrangement to do a home program at I don't know if it was Sampada and Pavamana's home. Yeah. And they didn't live too far from us, and my mother was in our home, and she was only there for less than 24 hours under hospice care, and she had a very auspicious passing. She was conscious till the end. She had harekrishna, and then my husband called. He knew they were doing a home program, and he called over there and said, if you could, Ladli's mother just passed away, if you could please chant for her, because we know you're over there having kirtan. And I had no idea, but he asked everybody, he goes, pack up the prasadam. All of us devotees, we're going to go over to Mahabharat and Ladli's home right now. And within 20, 25 minutes, all the devotees were there, like 6 Prabhupada disciples. Yudhisthira came and chanted the Nrsimha Kavacha over her, and Maharaj just sat down and did kirtan for an hour, just chanting, and they brought all the feast over. What a beautiful and kind gesture to do something like that for my mother. And one special quality I really loved about Maharaj is when he read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita and Prabhupada's purports, he read it so slowly and so methodically, every single word, because he didn't want to talk on it unless he understood every word he was reading. So I always thought, wow, he reads it so slowly and so carefully. Each word that he read, it was just very potent, because you could see he wants to understand before he speaks on that. So I thought that was he didn't rush through the reading of Prabhupada's purports. This is kind of I don't know if I should share it, but I will. It's kind of sweet, and it just shows that we had a nice friendship. And when he would come to stay at my house, it was during probably the last 5 years maybe when he came. He would come and we'd show him where he's going to stay, and he was always coming, take prasadam, shower, take prasadam, and get ready for the program that evening. And I said, Maharaj, you are a respectable gentleman. I cannot let you leave my home with your eyebrows like that, all overgrown. I said, please, just let me trim your eyebrows. So he would let me trim the eyebrows, and then that became a thing every time he came to stay. Wherever I'd see him, he goes, Lali, every time my eyebrows grow out, I think of you because you always trim them. And it was very fortunate that I got to go visit him twice in 1 year in Vrindavan. And when I heard he was going to go to live in India, I always thought he would be here when he left his body. And I thought, nobody's going to take care of him as well as the SanDiego devotees. We love him. He belongs to us, But this whole time, he's always going out and preaching, and he has friends all over the world. But I was always thinking, he's ours. We're going to take care of him. And then when I got to Vrindavan and I was joining in the Kirtan Sangha program, and I just couldn't believe how sweet the devotees there were taking care of him. And we were his friends, but to them, Maharaj was like the earth and I don't know, he was everything to them. But for us, he was like our dear, dear friend. And it was beautiful to see this Kirtan Sangha going on, because by this time, Maharaj had already, whatever weakness was in his heart, and at the expense of position and status, he didn't care. He didn't care about that. He cared about whatever was uncomfortable in his heart, to just let it out and not be attached to any results from that. And so by the time the Kirtan Sangha program started going on, it was quite a magical happening there. Everybody had their service to do. There was one girl there with this big sketch pad, and she was doing sketches like a court reporter of the devotees out there, and they were almost like an impression. There was never really a face, a clear face. It was just these impressions of the dancing, and I just thought, I was like, God, I would love to get one of those drawings. And I think there's a whole, because when I went back a year later, I went back twice in 1 year, and that same one woman was there painting and drawing these beautiful happenings of this kirtan program. And from the time I went to India at the beginning of the year, and then 6 months or so went by, and then I went back again. And Maharaj, we were in contact with each other every day, because when I was doing my japa in the morning, he was getting ready for the Kirtan Sangha in the evening, so we were both kind of connecting through the holy name. And I'd send him quotes from this little book, The Nectar of the Holy Name. So every day I'd send him a quote, and then he'd write back right away, oh, Nadia, that's a great quote, that's a wonderful quote, keep sending them. Because he wanted to be in the Association of Devotees. He said, just keep sending me those quotes. So every morning we were connecting and through the holy name and these quotes, and he was telling me about the Kirtan Sangha program. And I was able to speak with Maharaj 4 days before he passed away, because we were hosting Yamini and her final departure at the same time that Maharaj was leaving. So Maharaj, I was talking to him on the phone, he said, I would really like to speak with Yamini. So they had a chance to talk with each other, and he said, Yamini, he said, this is our time. This is our time to go now. And he said, we all have to go through this. We're all going to have to do this. And it's our time to do this now. And he was like wishing her well. And he passed away 4 days after that. And then 7 days after that, Yamini passed away. So they kind of both left around the same time. I think that's all. He was very dear to our family. He was instrumental in bringing my husband from Guadalajara to SanDiego. So Yeah, he was there from the beginning, and since he passed away, I've kind of withdrawn from the temple, and he really made me feel like I could do anything in Krishna consciousness. You know, like I remember doing the Mother Goose Parade, and we made this big float, and I wanted to save the world. I wanted to go out, and I wanted to tell everybody about Krishna, because he infused that in us. You just wanted to, I wanted to send Bhagavad Gitas to every world leader, because he was so into the preaching. We got to help as many people as we can. And I thought, okay, we can do this float, and we could put all these. It was just a beautiful, beautiful float. It looks like an airplane that landed from the Vaikuntha planets. And I didn't know he was following. I didn't know that he even knew I was doing it. And he was busy with all his projects and his programs. And I remember we were walking. The mothers and I were walking down one side of the street and following the parade route all the way from the beginning to the end. And at the very end, like a block before the end, I just happened to glance across through the parade, through the people, and behind them, Gunagrahi Maharaj and Badri Narayan were walking the same route. And it was so inspiring for me to see that. Like, here are our temple leaders, and they came out. I had no idea they were even there. And at the very end, he gave some glorification, but he was very quick to go into how we could make it better. The glorification was short, and the critique was more drawn out. And at my initiation, I said, Maharaj, I got initiated. I have a wonderful spiritual master. His name's Lokanath Swami Maharaj, and he was really happy that I take initiation. But again, he was very short to glorify, and he said, now that you're initiated, it's your duty to go share your good fortune with others. So, all glories to Gunagrahi Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Ladali. Nimai Prabhu, did you want to say a few words? Hare Krishna, just a reminder, in 7 minutes the kirtan will start.
I'll be very fast.
No problem.
I think I'll tell this on behalf of my mother first. They joined at Third and Thorn, my mother and father, at the old temple. And my mother didn't want to become a Hare Krishna. And my father somehow convinced her to go to the temple. And she goes, I'll go to the temple, but I'll never put on a sari. And Gunagrahi Maharaj managed to get her a sari. And it was the ugliest sari. It was blue. And she's like, I'm not going to put on a blue sari. But he somehow convinced her. And their first service was actually Hridayananda Maharaj and Tamal Krishna for a little while. We're staying in a house right behind Third and Thorn. And they were taking care of. My father's responsibility was to take care of those two gurus. But thanks to Gunagrahi Maharaj, actually they didn't have they told my mother and father they had a room for them, and they didn't. It was, my mother, as my mother tells me, it was actually the end of the hallway was the room and I had just been born, so that was the room we stayed in at the temple. And over the years, Gunagrahi Maharaj, it was a different experience for me than like for Yudhisthira and a lot of these devotees that had a friendship relationship with him. He was more like the old sannyasi guru that I grew up with. Always gave me some weird encouragement that was just for me. I'll give you an example. This was before 9/11, but they were already starting to tell the sannyasis they can't take their dandas on the airplanes. And so Gunagrahi Maharaj, I had a garage over here, a little workshop, and Gunagrahi Maharaj goes, I want you to figure out a way that I could take my danda on the airplane. So we started sitting there coming up with all these plans. And the first plan was it was going to work kind of like a tent pole. We'd cut it into all these pieces and attach rubber bands so it would all spring back together. And we did that. And it worked for maybe one trip. But Dundas, they're 3 pieces of bamboo and pretty impractical. So he brought it back to me and had me epoxy these little screws in it, and it would all screw together. It was just these funny little things he would have me do. But they kept me engaged. At one point, he really frustrated me. He wanted to build a new Sankirtan van for the devotees here, and I guess I had the only table saw around. So he goes, just let the brahmacharis borrow it. I promise they won't ruin it. Of course, 2 days later, they returned it, and it's not working. And then they totaled the van like 3 days later. But it was those adventures with the devotees. One thing that, Maharaj had a strong personality, and I was like 16, and for some reason I was on the temple board. And, they would talk about, like, doing they had me there to, like, hang the lights, the Christmas lights and stuff. And so they'd come for the before Janmashtami meeting. And Gunagrahi Maharaj was visiting, and we were at Badri Narayan Maharaj's condo. And there was the temple board there, sitting there. And I remember Yudhisthira and I think it was Mahakosh and a few other guys came in. It was the pack we called the homeboys, and for some reason Maharaj was mad at them, and I had never really seen this side, but they all jumped down and paid dandavats, and Maharaj stood right up and kicked one of them right in the head, and I just had never seen that relation from a sannyasi before, but he had his way of dealing with everyone, and it was really good. And after Ladli's mother passed away, I was actually working on her house, and Gunagrahi Maharaj came to stay behind the house in the trailer, and I built the deck and everything, and I was working all day out in the sun, and he goes, Nimai, we're going to go do a program. And I was dead tired. I'd been working and doing construction all day. And he goes, no, we're going to go do a program. And I go, where is it? He goes, just a little kirtan program. But it was in Palm Springs. And so we drive all the way out to Palm Springs, and we were a little lost. TK was with us and a couple of devotees. And we get to this house. And Maharaj, we had this interesting relationship. He'd always have me play mridanga, and he would play his drums, and he would look at me, and as he'd start tapping a little faster, he'd want me to play faster and louder. But we had a very interesting crowd. It was the Palm Springs crowd, and it was a bunch of flamboyant gentlemen, and as he'd play faster, I'd play faster, and this crowd of men started dancing really wild. It was a really wild-looking kirtan. I mean, it was hard to express, but he always kept me engaged and kept me connected to kirtan. And when I was young, as a teenager, and a lot of my friends were off doing drugs and partying and everything, my mother would go, Gunagrahi just wants you to come play mridanga. So I'd show up for Mangalarti and play mridanga, or Guru Puja and play mridanga, or Sunday Feast and play mridanga. But when he'd show up, and especially when he showed up with all his wild brahmacharis from Argentina, and then he'd ask me to play mridanga, it kept me engaged. It kept me around, and it kept me out of a lot of trouble. I think a lot of us in here can say Maharaj kept us out of a lot of trouble. So we all... Thank you.